Hi, everybody. It is Eve Harrow, host of Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Today is January 28th, 2018, and the 12th day of Shvat, 5778. And actually, Shvat is going to be the topic of this monologue. I've had some incredible interviews over the last few weeks, and they've been long. So I figured this week I'll just give you like a short thing, some thoughts that I've been having. I do hope, though, that you listened to last week's interview with Rabbi Nathan Lopez Cordoza. I've gotten some very interesting feedback. Some of it to be expected, like, oh no, we can't make any changes, which is exactly what he's talking about. And that kind of like fear of doing anything that's different than what's accepted. And those of you who heard his interview knows that what he's saying, understand that what he's saying is that maybe we have to go back to some of the things that we used to do, and that some of the things we now do were just kind of interim when we were in the diaspora and maybe aren't so relevant anymore. Anyhow, if you didn't catch the interview, I highly recommend it, and I hope that you're all reading his book. And I am deep in the middle of it and finding new wisdom all the time. So if you have a message that you'd like me to pass on to him, because he gets a lot of mail and can't answer all his mail, but I do have kind of an in. So anyway, it's a couple of people have already taken advantage of that, and I'm happy to pass it along to him for some extra reading or things if you want to expand on what he was teaching us. Anyway, so that was last week. This week, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Shvat, because I realized a few things this week. So my birthday's coming up. I was born in Shvat, Kaftet B'Shvat, towards the very, very end of the month. But I realized that other interesting things have happened to me in Shvat. And I don't know, maybe we all have a month that's just kind of like our month. And not even necessarily the month that we were born in, but maybe a month where some of the more exciting things in our lives have happened. And I'm really not into horoscopes. And I know that there's a lot of people who are into astrology and trying to make connections. It could be, and it's definitely a thought that I've entertained, that we are born into a certain month, not because it's fated that we're going to be whatever that personality trait is that's associated with that month, but because Hashem wants us, in order to be able to accomplish what it is that we need to accomplish in this life, he needs us to be brave or stubborn or whatever it is that the tendencies of people born in that month or under that sign would show. So it's not that it's just randomly that you're going to be born in that month and that's it. That's the kind of personality you have, but that's the kind of personality you have or that you need, and therefore that's why you're born in that month. It's kind of a different way of looking at it. But when I look up Shvat or another terminology, Aquarius, it's a little eerie as to how much that does. Not totally, but there's a lot of things about that sign that do describe my personality. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, so I was born in Shvat, and I did not become a mother in Shvat. My oldest daughter was born in Nisan, but the only kid that we had that was born in Shvat is our son Amiyad, who's our first Israeli. And that experience of his birth still ranks as one of the most spiritual experiences of my entire life. Something that I made sure to talk about at his wedding a few months ago, where giving birth in Jerusalem at dawn and just feeling like the presence of so many of the mothers that came before me, all through history, all through time, who enabled me to be Jewish and giving birth to this beautiful baby in Jerusalem after we had, we had made Aliyah, after we had moved here almost 30 years ago. So Shvat has been, that was like a huge thing for me, his birth. And then I did become a grandmother in Shvat. And our oldest granddaughter, Ya'ara Kineret, is going to have her Bat Mitzvah in just a few days. She was born on the 14th of Shvat, just a little bit before the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. And so they're going to be having a Tu B'Shvat Seder, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, as kind of the obvious way of celebrating her birth. And so that was a huge thing for me also, that next stage of becoming a grandmother, the next generation. The importance of grandchildren in Judaism cannot be overstated. We even give our sons, the blessing that we give our sons on Friday night is the blessing that was given to Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, and the blessings that Jacob gives them. And I remember learning that when Jacob finds out that Joseph is still alive and he's in Egypt, it doesn't really matter if Od Yosef Chai, if Joseph is still alive, if his children aren't brought into the family. His children are Egyptian. Ephraim and Manasseh are Egyptian. They're born to an Egyptian woman. They're not part of the people in terms of the slavery in Egypt yet. Yaakov puts a tremendous amount of effort into these grandsons, and Ephraim and Manasseh do leave with us. They leave with us from Egypt. And that entire experience of Passover and of Sinai and of getting the Torah at Sinai and of coming into the land of Israel is very much their experience as well. And I think that's a huge message for us, is that it's important to also try and put our children on the path that we want them to put on, to love God, to feel God in their lives, to uphold the tradition as much as possible. But it's also important to do that with our grandchildren and to keep that going for as long as we can. So, first of all, Mazal Tov to my Ya'ara. Her name means, Ya'ara is a honeysuckle. Kinneret is the Sea of Galilee, the beautiful body of water, the freshwater lake that we have here in Israel. So it's a very nature-oriented name. But the intention of Ya'ara is that my mother-in-law passed away during Shvat, and Ya'ara was named after her in the sense that her name was Sylvia, which means a forest. Pennsylvania was William Penn's forest. And a Ya'ar in Hebrew is a forest. And so the intention of Ya'ara was to Hebraicize that name, but it also stands alone as meaning a honeysuckle, which is a great name for her because she is just such a sweetheart, such a wonderful person. And as she's now going into womanhood and going into teenagehood, which is one of the perks of grandparenting, is that you don't actually have to live with the teenage girls, but you can be there for them when they need you and need some unconditional love and understanding. And so hopefully it's going to be the best of both worlds. And I say this as somebody who raised 4 daughters and remembers their teenagehood very well. So that's Yara. Just looking forward to enjoying the child that she is, looking forward to the woman that she's going to become, and feeling just tremendously blessed to have her in our lives. But her sister Tiferet was not only born during Shvat 2 years later, but was born on my birthday. So that's another wonderful thing for me in the month of Shvat. My first 2 granddaughters born in Shvat, and that took some planning on the part of my daughter, 9 months ahead of time, to give me a wonderful birthday present in a granddaughter. And also one of my grandsons is born during Shvat, my son's son. So, and I was in the room when all of my grandchildren were born, and I got to see both my daughter become a mother and my son become a father during the month of Shvat. So for me, it's been, I guess, like the month in my life. And yeah, wait for it. You know this is coming, guys. But Costa Rica, that tremendous experience that I had 2 years ago, the tremendous spiritual experience, the connection with Hashem that I had both in the rainforest and on the beach at the Pacific Ocean, a beach, incidentally, which was lined with trees, was also during Shvat. I wasn't sure. I went and looked it up this week. And yes, I was in Costa Rica during the first week of Shvat. So maybe my neshama, maybe my soul is a little more open during Shvat. I don't know. I really don't know. So Tu B'Shvat, which is the holiday that's coming up this week, it's a holiday with a lot of customs to it. It's known as the New Year for the trees. Judaism has actually 4 different New Years. The first of Elul is the cutoff date for tithing one's livestock. That happens in the summer months. Oh, and before that, the first of Nisan is the New Year of counting the reign of Jewish kings, and with reference to the festival cycle, and that's Nisan is the month of where Passover falls, and spring, and that's really considered like that's supposed to be really the new year. And then Elul, like I said, for tithing one's livestock. And the first of Tishrei, which is the month where we now do celebrate Rosh Hashanah, is the new year for judging mankind for the counting of sabbatical and jubilee years, for counting the first 3 years, the orla, produce of newly planted trees, were not allowed to eat from trees during the first 3 years, and for grain and vegetable tithes. But the 15th of Shvat, which is interesting because the other ones are all the first of the month, and here you have the 15th of the month of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, Tu meaning Tet Vav. Every letter in the Hebrew language also has a numerical equivalent. So, but we don't say 10 and 5, which would be Yud and Hey, because that's like part of Hashem's name. So instead we say Tet Vav, we say 9 and 6. And that also adds up to 15, obviously, for anybody who finished first grade. So Tu B'Shvat is the day celebrating the new year of the trees that's the cutoff point for tithing fruits. And the 15th is a big day. It's a few of our holidays are on the 15th of the month. The holiday of Passover starts on the 15th of the month. Sukkot starts on the 15th of the month. Of course, we have Tu B'Av, our holiday of love, I guess you could say. It's also the grape festival. I did, what I really loved, a presentation at Limud last month on Tu B'Av, and I think I'm going to be giving it again in the States when I go in March. I'm going to be doing that at a synagogue, like an hours-long presentation about the meaning of Tu B'Av. But that's what that is the full moon, because the first days of the month are really, they're dark. There's no moon, or there's the sighting of the moon, and that's when you have the new month. And so the 15th is the full moon, and that's seen as also fertility and life and hope and, of course, light. And so there's a lot of meaning to the 15th of the month. What's interesting about Tu B'Shvat also is, according to our sources, more rain is going to fall before Tu B'Shvat than after Tu B'Shvat. It's more than the midpoint of our winter. And guess what? But modern meteorology and modern measuring has shown that is exactly true, which is why it's so wonderful that we had a lot of rain this last week. No snow, but a lot of rain this last week to get it all in, because almost really inevitably, and I don't know if there's been any exceptions, it's going to rain less after Tu B'Shvat than it does before Tu B'Shvat. What's interesting is to have the birthday of the trees, or the new year for the trees, when the trees have nothing on them. If you go and you look at trees today, definitely in Israel, but anywhere, I suppose, in the northern hemisphere, they look like sticks. There's no leaves. There's definitely no fruit or anything like that on the trees. And it almost looks dead. And the message here is a huge message that the potential is inside the tree. The outside of the tree doesn't look like anything special, but it's all cooking inside. It's all like getting ready to blossom. It's all getting ready for that. And that says a lot about us also, not just in the winter months, but using the winter as an analogy for darkness, or for the times where maybe we feel kind of low, or there's not much good happening, but there's potential in all of us. And actually, the Hebrew word for like a crisis or a difficult time that we're going through, the Hebrew word for that is mashber, which literally means something that's cracked, something that's broken. And within that, just even think of, let's say, a seed. When you plant a seed in the ground, where does it breaks and then it sprouts open. Or like an egg, the same thing. It's in the breaking that it sprouts open. Or even when we think about the giving of the Torah at Sinai, which is going to be coming up soon in our weekly portions, the first ones are broken, right? Moses comes down, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and is upset because of the sin of the golden calf and breaks them. But the broken ones, along with the whole ones, the second set that he brings down, are both kept together in the Ark of the Covenant. And I think that most of us realize that is in the time of our crises, in the time when we feel that we're broken, that's where our growth happens. That's where we find new strength. That's where we find that kind of rejuvenation in order to start again, maybe in a different direction, but to bring something in. And a lot of this has tremendous meaning inside of nature as well. So it's also been used now as by the environmentalists, by the early resettlers of the land of Israel, as, planting trees as a sign of we're coming back, a sign of renewal of life here. Israel's the only country in the world that ended the 20th century with more trees than which it began, because the Jews came home And you had the Jewish National Fund and other organizations who are planting trees and trying to make it green. So really that symbolism is tremendous. And we have also what was really adopted to a great degree was the almond tree. The almond tree, if you look in the Bible, the almond tree is the shoots of the almond is what comes off of Aaron's staff. And the almond tree is a very old tree here that we have. We have proof of it being here in the land of Israel already for a long time. We've got burnt almonds that were found, for example, in Shiloh after the Philistines came and destroyed where the tabernacle was at Shiloh. They came and apparently burnt it after it was taken. And we have burnt almonds and raisins that were found that are over 3,000 years old. So, and also because the first tree that blossoms is the almond tree. We've got the pink and the white blossoms. I've already seen them here, even though those are really early, but I've already seen them in different areas. Those are the bitter and the sweet almonds. And that led to a song, Hashkedia Porachat, the almond tree is blooming, which is a song that a lot of the kids and a lot of people sing during this time of year. It's actually wrong. There's no such thing as a shkedia. The tree is known as a shaked, but they needed another syllable in the song. So they put in that, and they put in the shkedia, like the feminine, but it actually really isn't a word. So there's a lot of people who misnamed the tree, but it's really a shaked. So we've got the 7 species of the land of Israel: the wheat and the barley, the grape, the figs, the dates, the olives, and the pomegranates. And what the Kabbalists, the mystical Jews, did in the 18th century, I think it was like 1753 or so, they actually put out a book where they made a Seder along the lines of the Passover Seder that we had. So they made a Tu B'Shvat Seder. And as I mentioned before, that's what we're going to be doing. My daughter and son-in-law are the ones working hard at this, but we're going to be celebrating my granddaughter's Bat Mitzvah with a Tu B'Shvat Seder, and having wine, red wine, white wine, having lots of different fruits, because it's really a celebration of the fruits. What's a little ironic is here in the modern state of Israel, you can go around and you can see dried fruit and nuts being sold everywhere. It's a little bit off in the sense that when we weren't in the land, and so we were having Tu B'Shvat Seder, and you had fruit and you had dried fruit because it could last, right? And it wasn't going to spoil, to keep in mind the land of Israel. But now a lot of the dried fruit that we're eating here in Israel aren't from Israel. They're from Thailand, or they're from other places, and they're imported. So I think that those of us who are privileged to live in Israel should make it a point of trying to have the fresh fruit that we now get to grow and get to eat here in Israel at our Tu B'Shvat Seder. So in addition to whatever we can come up with from the 7 species, whatever's around, there's some other great fruits that are blooming now and that are so delicious on the market, like persimmons, for example, and obviously all the citrus fruits are out there and the apples. So in addition, or maybe instead of having the dried fruits that really aren't Israeli, but have somehow become synonymous with the holiday, maybe we should really be having some fresh fruits and some things that are growing in Israel. For a long time, people used to have what we called boxer or carob, because that was a fruit that you could ship all over the world from Israel and it wouldn't spoil. But you could break your teeth on it also. There's a lot tastier things to have out there. So maybe along with a lot of things that we now understand better because of the renewal of the land of Israel, like something that I've never understood is people who leave Israel to go to visit graves of very wonderful rabbis who had said over the many, many years, hundreds of years that we weren't in the land of Israel, that we should go, that visiting their grave was like visiting the land of Israel. It confuses me every single year why people will leave the land of Israel in order to go visit those graves. Like, you're with the real thing. Why would you go to something that's the default mode? So, those are some of the things that now that we're back in the land, these are some of the traditions that maybe we can tweak back because we don't have to be in practice anymore. We don't have to be playing the wooden pianos that make no music. We can actually be making the music. So, I love fruit. I love trees. I've had some of my most magnificent and spiritual experiences and connecting to Hashem in nature. And it turns out that I live in Gush Etzion. I live in the Etzion block, and the symbol of the Etzion block is actually a tree. Okay, it's an oak tree. It's the one, what's called the lone tree. It's the one tree that was left standing here in 1948 by the Arabs after they came marauding through here. And and slaughtering all the Jews or pulling them out of here during the 1948 Israel's War of Independence. And that's why for 19 years, this area didn't have Jews living in it, but now we're back. So a lot of these things come together. The sign, if we go back to a little of the astrological stuff. So the sign for Aquarius, which is Shvat, is the bucket. So that's the water bearer. And not only do I love drinking water, but I love swimming. It's my favorite activity to do, my favorite sport activity to do. And it's also water, the sign of renewal, mikvah, and going through the Red Sea, right? The Reed Sea, which we did today, or yesterday, right? When we were reading the Torah portion, was all about that. And water always is renewal and being birthed in renewal. But it's also the sign is also air. The zodiac, I think, element for this month is air. And it turns out that even though I'm atrociously not talented in so many ways, the thing that I find myself doing now and where I've made my passion and made my career is by talking, is by using the air in my lungs to find the words to try and explain to people the wonder of life here in Israel, taking people around and seeing these places, going abroad and explaining to people about that, being on the radio with you guys right now and talking about that. So are all these coincidences? Are all these signs? Are all these Hashem like throwing things my way? I don't know. I really don't know. But it turns out that this month of Shvat is personally for me a special month. And maybe you have that too. Maybe try and pull together some of the clues in your lifetime. And maybe there's a month or a time or an element or something that stands out more for you than any other time or any other element. And maybe that's not just coincidence. And maybe we have to appreciate that as well. So I am enjoying this month, and we have a great family simcha. We have a great time in our family coming up this week, and where all my children and all my grandchildren, we're all going to be together, which is, of course, the most important thing for me. So that's it for today, just a little bit of that. And I want to thank once again Ben and Tabitha and everybody at the Land of Israel Network for giving me the opportunity to share some of my feelings and getting back to it hopefully next week. Also interviewing some of the people that I think are really important to hear from and hear their thoughts and hear where they're going with their Judaism or whatever it is that's keeping them busy and is lighting up our world. So have a great week, everybody. Shavua Tov from Israel. This is Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation. Please feel free to write to me. I love hearing from you guys, good and bad, like whatever your thoughts are and whatever is going on with you. So that's Eve at thelandofisrael.com. And take care, everybody. Eve Harrow. Goodbye for now.